If you are an existing or an aspiring supply chain professional, you must have always asked yourself, what does the day in the life of a supply chain manager look like? Do they spend all their day analyzing numbers, or they spend all the time in meetings, or they spend their entire time in a warehouse? Well, if you ask ChatGPT this question, it will give you an answer like, at 8 a.m. they check the emails, at 9 a.m. they review the dashboards, at 10 a.m. they do an operational review, at 1 o'clock they do a project review, and so on. Well, the problem is that the job of a supply chain manager is not that predictable. It's challenging. Honestly, if the supply chain manager's role was that predictable, I wouldn't have these white hair by now. There could be a lot of surprises in this job. Every day of the week could look different depending on the work schedules of, let's say, the warehouse or the factories and so on. And then if you're in a supply chain manager role, which is regional or global, time differences play a big role. And what you do during the morning and the afternoon could be heavily dependent on which time zone you are located in with respect to the rest of your team. So in this video, I'm going to give you a more realistic day in the life of a supply chain manager. And I will also give you a little bit of a flavor on what are the different skills at play in different parts of this routine. My name is Jamil Hai, and I've been working in supply chain management positions across South Asia, Middle East, and North America for more than 20 years. And my mission is to help you build real life skills for your job and career that they don't teach you in college. And if you are preparing for a supply chain job interview anytime soon, you should definitely book a session with me, because I'm going to take your resume, the job description you're applying for, and based on a combination of those two and my 20 plus years of experience, will give you some laser guided tips and tricks which will maximize your chances of success. So go ahead now and book your session. So instead of giving you an hour by hour schedule of a supply chain manager's day, which is very hard to predict given all the factors we talked about so far, I'm going to give you in general a morning routine and an afternoon routine. And within that, we will cover some of the key themes which apply to most of the supply chain positions. So if we start with the morning routine, there are 4 parts of it. The first one obviously starts with the coffee. In order to survive in a supply chain role, honestly, you need a strong kick of caffeine to start your day. And therefore, ideally, your day should start with a strong dose of black coffee, because that is going to keep you running for the whole day. And after that, typically, you're going to check your KPI dashboards, because you really want to understand where the business is. What was the service from yesterday's operation, or what is the period to date service? And then if there are other elements around the cost, service, and cash triangle, because one of the most important things a supply chain manager is trying to balance is that triangle on the cost, service, and cash side, which is something I've covered in a lot of details in my video on how to enter supply chain from another profession, which you can watch by clicking over here. So the dashboards will typically be connected to one or more of those 3 sides of the triangle. Then the next part of the morning routine definitely will be emails. You have to stay on top of your emails, and maybe in one of the future videos, I'll cover the specific email etiquette for a supply chain manager's job. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the skills at play in this morning routine. And then the 4th part of the morning routine is operational meetings. There could be SNOP meetings, or there could be SNOE meetings. SNOP process basically stands for sales and operations planning, where you're looking at 3 to 36 months or sometimes even more. So it's more of a semi-strategic window where you look at all the time horizons. And then the SNOE meetings are more tactical, because they are called sales and operations execution meetings. So you're looking at 0 to 3 months. So they're highly tactical, highly operational. I've covered both concepts of SNOP and SNOE briefly in my video on the demand planning manager's job interview preparation, which you can watch by clicking over here again. Now, if I talk about some of the key skills required in this morning routine, of course, as far as the coffee goes, you need to have a good taste of coffee. So that goes without saying. But as far as the KPI dashboards are concerned, there are 3 skills at play here. Number 1 is your analytical skills. Obviously, when you're looking at dashboards, you're looking at a lot of data. As a supply chain manager, you need to develop that understanding of those KPIs very smartly and very quickly. You need to be at that stage where you look at a dashboard, you look at the trend, and then you know what's going on in the business, especially as far as those specific metrics are concerned. And then the other piece is storytelling, because as you are looking at that data, you are already, as a smart supply chain manager, building a story in your head. So for example, if your service is going in the wrong direction, you need to understand what's driving that. What are the factors? So you have to have a story building in your mind, so that when you're presenting that data to your senior leadership, to your general manager, you exactly know what's going on and what you're going to be telling. So that storytelling is a very critical piece within the role of a supply chain manager. And then finally, you're also planning, because as you're looking at the data and you are typically in a role of a supply chain manager, you are managing a team, you may want to start thinking about that. Okay, maybe this metric, we need to do a deeper dive. So you may want to think about in your team meeting, you may want to delegate that task to somebody. Or there is a KPI which is affected by another business unit or another region or another time zone. So you may want to think about, okay, how you are going to connect with that team and get their support in order to get this back on track or something like that. So there is a lot of planning also going in your head. When it comes to emails, time management is a very critical aspect, because you need to ensure that the emails are responded on in time. Therefore, it's a good practice that in the morning you allocate maybe 15-20 minutes every day to make sure that you go through the email and make sure that you're not missing any of the critical emails. And maybe, like I said earlier, in one of the future videos, I may talk about the email best practices for a supply chain manager role. And finally, if you think about the skills at play in an operational meetings, there are lots of different skills. So for example, action orientation is the most important skill required in an operational meeting, because you are not supposed to be in meetings where you are just watching slides and lots of presentations going on. It should be about actions, what decisions you are taking. If you are being presented a piece of data, what's the purpose of it? Because the intent is not to waste a lot of time. So action orientation is definitely there. Then positioning, how you position your point of view is a very key aspect. And maybe when we talk about storytelling in the future, we'll talk about positioning as well. Leadership, of course, is a key part, because if you're in a meeting, you need to be in that driver's position, because once again, you are not supposed to be, as a supply chain manager, not supposed to be a passive member of a team. You need to be driving actions, taking leadership, taking ownership. So leadership is definitely there. Decision quality, because the quality of your decision making can make or break the business, because you are in a very pivotal role. So decision quality is absolutely there. Accountability, you need to hold people accountable. So if, for example, there is an action that was taken last time and nothing happened, you need to hold that person accountable. Okay, why did it not happen? Do you need any help? Not necessarily in a very attacking way, but you need to hold people accountable so that they can complete their actions on time. And finally, time management, absolutely. The meetings need to start and finish on time. I know a lot of companies like Amazon, they have done some very smart things. For example, I was reading somewhere that in Amazon, for short meetings, they don't even put chairs in meeting rooms, so that people can come and stand and without sitting, because once you sit down, you're comfortable. But if it's a short meeting, you just stand and have a quick discussion and then just go away, so that you can take decisions faster and manage time better, unless if it's a full review that requires like boardroom and those kind of things, which is different. And then as you think about the afternoon routine, there are 4 parts of it. Number 1 is team meetings or one-on-ones, or your direct reports having meetings with you. Facility visits, because as a supply chain manager, especially if within your ownership of your role, you're managing a warehouse as well, or somebody who is reporting to you is managing a warehouse, you definitely have to ensure that you are visiting that warehouse if geography permits, frequently, so that you can see the actual operation. And we'll talk about some of the key skills involved there in a second. Then you would also be spending time on workshops or training your team, because remember, you are a supply chain manager. A big part of your role is managing your team and also making sure that your team is upskilled. So workshops and trainings are an essential element of a typical afternoon routine. And then finally, something which not a lot of people talk about, but I think it has to be talked about and super critical, is focus time. So focus time basically means that you should always have a special time in your day, whether it's 30 minutes or 1 hour, depending on which day it is, and so on, where you should not be taking any meetings, where you should not be looking at any emails, but you should be working on important strategic stuff. If I go back to the Eisenhower time management matrix, stuff which is important but not necessarily urgent in that quadrant, because that work is super critical. And if you don't get that done, then you may be winning the battle, but you might be losing a war. So therefore, that focus time where you are just working on the strategic stuff is absolutely important. Now, if you think about some of the skills involved in this afternoon routine, let's talk about the team meetings first. So in the team meetings, of course, the number one skill you need to have as a manager is emotional intelligence. You need to have an emotional pulse on what your team is feeling, because how they feel will have the biggest impact on how their performance is. So your EI quotient needs to be high, and it's something that you can work on. And maybe that's just like storytelling. That's another topic which I should cover in one of my future videos very soon. The other piece which is important in team meetings is situational leadership. Now, situational leadership, I'm a big fan of, and I've used it throughout my career, so much so that I've made a video about this topic very early on when my YouTube channel was very new, and you can watch that video over here. And situational leadership at a very high level is basically the tool that allows you to organize yourself on how you manage teams where you have got different skill set or different experience levels, right? So the way you will manage a team member who is brand new, let's say a fresh graduate, no experience, your management style or your leadership style with that person is going to be very different than someone who has been working in the business for 20 years and they've been doing their job for, let's say, 5 years, because they are in a much more commanding position, so you can delegate more to them as compared to somebody who's a fresh graduate. You need to be telling them more, or you need to be directing them more. So more details are of course covered in that video that I just referred to. And then obviously people development, because whenever you are in a team meeting as a manager, you need to also look at your team with that manager's eye, that how do I develop my team? How do I make sure that they are developing in the right direction, or they are developing in the way that they want to, or in the direction that they want to develop. Somebody may want to become a logistics manager in your team, so their development plan will be very different than someone else who wants to become a customer service manager on your team. So those kind of things. And then delegation. Obviously, you cannot be successful as a manager if you don't know how to delegate, period. And this is one of those skills which on the paper sounds very easy, but it's not that easy, especially when you are a control freak. And I learned, honestly, this the hard way. So delegation, absolutely very critical when it comes to team meetings as a supply chain manager. Second one is facility visits. So in the facility visits, I think the most important concept to keep in mind is this Gemba Walk concept, or go and see concept. Gemba is basically a term coming from the Japanese language, and it's basically the whole concept of Gemba comes from the Toyota production system. It's a part of the overall lean philosophy. But in Gemba, it gives you that structure on when you are walking through a warehouse, and when you are walking through a factory, what are the things that you should be looking at, how you should behave, because sometimes you might see something very alarming. Let's say, you are seeing a pallet which is tilted, or you are seeing a quality standard not being followed. How you respond to it is absolutely important, and can make or break, because if you're freaking out or you are just getting angry, that may send a very wrong message to your team, right? So in Gemba, if you look at the elements of Gemba, it's you observe, you recognize if there is a mistake, you communicate, you cooperate, and then you solve the problem. So it's a very methodical process on how you should conduct these Gemba walks. And of course, there's a lot of text out there. A lot of people have written lots of stuff about Gemba walks, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details there here. Obviously, you need to have the technical mastery. So if you are, let's say, walking through a warehouse and you are someone who has already worked as a logistics manager, you are going to see things that others won't, right? Because it's just your operation. Similarly, if you have spent some time running a factory or being a part of a factory team, you will see things in a factory which others will not. People development is once again important here. So as you do those Gemba walks, you also need to understand like what kind of talent is there. Normally there is a high turnover in warehouse talent because a lot of times there are contractors working, but then still there is an element of people development there, and obviously accountability. If you're seeing a violation of a safety standard, an immediate action is required, of course. So you don't have to yell at people, you don't have to get emotional about it, but you have to make sure that there is swift action happening, because if safety standards are not followed, people can lose their lives typically. Imagine, somebody's walking through a warehouse with a hard hat, and then you have a warehouse which is 5 rows high, then obviously it's a recipe for disaster. So you have to make sure that you are taking swift corrective actions and punitive actions are taking place to make sure people follow quality, because people follow safety. And then the same attitude should be around the quality as well in the warehouse. Next, in terms of workshops, the skills that are at play here are obviously problem solving. Most likely in a workshop, you are trying to solve a problem, so that skill comes in very handy. People development, once again, you need to keep an eye on like which part of your team members are more active, they are showing more initiative, because obviously that goes into their development planning. Collaboration and innovation management. A lot of times you are bringing new solutions, new technologies through these workshops. So how you manage that life cycle of that innovation is more important than ever before, because supply chains are not different from any other industry. I mean, think about AI in every field, and supply chain is no different, right? So how you identify and manage those innovations can make or break your ability to move your supply chain into the future. And then finally, when you think about the focus time that I mentioned earlier, time management obviously is important there. This is where your planning skills come in, analytical skills, critical thinking, problem solving, because this is where you are strategizing. You are allowing that time to yourself so that you not only have your pulse with your dashboards and your team meetings and your operational meetings on what's going on every single day, but in this focus time, you're also thinking about, okay, what am I going to do in the next couple of years, not only for myself, for my team. So that focus time really provides you that game plan of a strategist that you are then going to execute. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've also made videos on topics like what is a warehouse management system and what is an enterprise resource planning system, which you can watch by clicking over here. Keep watching.